A single decision shattered decades of trust, turning allies into rivals and partners into pawns on the global chessboard. But was this collapse truly about trade, or is there a hidden game no one dares to reveal? When the United States imposed a sweeping 50% tariff on Indian goods, it sent shockwaves far beyond the trading floors and stock market graphs. At first glance, it looked like just another policy maneuver, a bold stroke to shield domestic industries. But the true impact of such a move resembled a tremor beneath the surface of global trade, unsettling foundations that had taken decades to build. Overnight, goods that once flowed freely between two of the world's largest democracies became trapped behind walls of cost and politics. Exporters in India suddenly found themselves priced out of the American market, while US importers struggled with shortages and rising costs. What seemed like an economic calculation unfolded like a fault line, tearing through a fragile landscape of cooperation. Beyond the visible numbers lay an invisible fracture, shaking the confidence of investors, supply chains, and governments alike. This was not a mere tariff. It was a signal that economic ties, no matter how strong, could be disrupted in an instant by the weight of political agendas. And with that single decision, the world was forced to confront the fragility of trade relationships that had once been taken for granted. Beneath the towering figures of billions lost in trade, the real cost of the tariffs revealed itself in lives and livelihoods quietly disrupted. For Indian farmers exporting crops to American markets, contracts were abruptly cancelled, leaving warehouses filled with unsold produce and families plunged into uncertainty. In the technology sector, where collaboration had been thriving, projects slowed as costs climbed, and skilled workers suddenly faced layoffs or relocation. Small manufacturers who had painstakingly built ties with American retailers found their goods priced out of reach, erasing years of effort in a matter of weeks. On the US side, importers and retailers who relied on Indian textiles, pharmaceuticals, and machinery faced empty shelves and inflated costs, leaving them struggling to keep businesses afloat. These were the unseen casualties, ordinary people bearing the brunt of decisions made in distant offices. Their voices rarely reached the headlines, yet they represented the backbone of an interdependent economy now fractured. Beyond charts and percentages, the human toll revealed a harsher truth. Policies crafted as economic weapons do not just strike at governments. They ripple through the lives of workers, families, and entire communities who had once depended on a promise of stability in trade. For years, the United States and India had carefully cultivated the image of strategic partners, united by shared democratic values and a growing alignment in defense, technology, and economic cooperation. The trade relationship was often cited as proof that two great democracies could prosper by complementing each other's strengths. But with the sudden imposition of harsh tariffs, that partnership was tested in ways few had anticipated. What had once been framed as a bond of trust began to look more like a fragile arrangement of convenience. Indian leaders, blindsided by the move, questioned whether Washington truly saw them as a partner or merely a competitor to be restrained. In America, businesses dependent on Indian imports found themselves caught in the middle of a political maneuver disguised as protectionism. The sense of alliance weakened as suspicion took its place, with both sides quietly recalibrating their strategies. Behind diplomatic smiles and official statements, the fracture was evident. Trade, once a bridge between the nations, had turned into a battlefield of conflicting priorities. It became a reminder that even alliances grounded in decades of cooperation can be unsettled overnight when national interests shift and economic warfare takes precedence over shared vision. The 50% tariff was framed as a shield for American workers, a bold attempt to reclaim industries long eroded by foreign competition. But beneath that justification lurked a deeper and more unsettling question. Was the true purpose of this move really about jobs, or was it aimed at curbing India's growing influence on the global stage? By the time the tariffs hit, India had been expanding rapidly in technology, pharmaceuticals, and manufacturing, threatening to compete head-on with established powers. For American leaders, it was a way to flex economic power without firing a single shot, to send a message about who still controlled the levers of global trade. Yet, the ambiguity of intent left room for suspicion. Was this about protecting the vulnerable worker in Detroit, or about reminding India of its place in the hierarchy of global economics. The question lingered unanswered, and in that uncertainty, trust eroded further. What appeared to be an economic strategy revealed itself as something closer to geopolitical maneuvering, leaving both sides wary of whether cooperation was ever as genuine as it seemed. As the trade war between the US and India deepened, the shockwaves did not remain confined to their borders. Across Asia, governments and businesses watched closely, recalculating their own positions in a region already defined by fragile balances of power. Countries like Vietnam, Bangladesh, and Indonesia began eyeing opportunities to capture the markets India was losing, while at the same time fearing that they too could become targets of sudden tariffs if their exports threatened American industries. China, ever watchful, observed the fracture with interest, recognizing how the rift might open new doors for its own influence in South Asia. Supply chains that once flowed predictably were forced to reroute, driving up costs and creating delays that spilled over into regional economies. Investors, sensing instability, pulled back or redirected funds, further amplifying the uncertainty. What began as a bilateral dispute quietly reshaped the strategic calculations of an entire continent. Each nation asked itself whether alliances built on trade were truly reliable or whether they could be undone at a moment's notice. The collapse was not just about two countries. It was a warning that the ripple effects of economic warfare could redraw the very map of Asian cooperation and competition. Beneath the headlines of tariffs and trade deficits lay a deeper revelation about the fragility of trust between nations. The collapse was not only about goods being taxed or markets being disrupted. It was about how quickly years of partnership could unravel when power became the driving force. For both the US and India, the sudden escalation revealed the limits of friendship in the face of national interest. Businesses and policymakers who had once spoken confidently about mutual growth now found themselves questioning the very foundation of cooperation. The hidden cost was not just in lost revenue, but in the erosion of faith. Faith that agreements would hold, that promises would be honored, that alliances would endure beyond political expediency. Once broken, such trust is far harder to rebuild than any trade balance. Behind the economic statistics stood a sobering truth. When nations treat trade as a weapon rather than a bridge, they risk dismantling not only deals but the very architecture of international partnership. The real fallout of the tariffs was a reminder that global cooperation rests on fragile ground. And when power games take precedence, even the strongest alliances can dissolve into uncertainty overnight. In the end, the story of the US India trade collapse is more than a clash of tariffs and policies. It is a lesson about how fragile trust can be in a world where power often overshadows partnership. What began as an economic decision unfolded into a geopolitical tremor, reshaping supply chains, unsettling alliances, and reminding us that trade is never just about numbers. It is about people, about futures, and about the silent threads of cooperation that hold nations together. The true cost of these 50% tariffs was not only measured in billions lost, but in the erosion of faith between two democracies once thought to be strategic allies. The warning is clear: when short-term power plays dominate long-term vision, the bridges we build today can become the walls of tomorrow. Good luck on your journey of learning and reflection, and thank you for allowing me to walk with you through this critical story of global trade. May curiosity continue to guide you, and may wisdom always shape the way you see the world.